Hello coders, today we're going to be talking about what you can and cannot do with PHP. Now, I'm a freelance web developer. My name is Peter Fisher for anyone new here, and I get asked fairly frequently what you can do and what you can't do with different programming languages, and also what kind of tools you need to actually start learning to code. Usually I come back with a very generic answer, I feel, where I say it depends on what you wish to achieve. What is it that you want to build? But let's just think about that. What can you and can you not build with certain programming languages? In particular, let's talk about PHP today. Now, if you ever have the pleasure of seeing Erasmus, the creator, the founder of PHP, I was fortunate enough to actually have some talking time with him after PHP Serbia a few years ago. If you see one of his conferences, one of his keynote talks, you'll know that PHP was never intended, from his point of view, as a fully fledged programming language. Its intention was to create a simple way of interacting with the back-end code to display variables and things like that to the front end. It's kind of like a templating system, if you will. However, PHP grew extremely fast back in the day, and it's gone from strength to strength with all sorts of things such as object-oriented programming. And now with PHP 7, we have a very quick and robust programming language to use. However, like I said, it was never really its initial intention. So what can you do and what shouldn't you do with PHP? Well, for one, Facebook is created by PHP. In fact, Facebook uses PHP in their own kind of way. It's not true PHP in the true sense. They've gone and hacked about, created it, improved it themselves, and also given back to the PHP community as well, which is awesome. So yes, obviously you can create websites with PHP. Now, websites is extremely general term. Here we're talking about e-commerce websites. We're talking about booking websites, booking hotels. We're talking about job recruitment websites. Basically, anything you see on the internet can be created by PHP for the backend. Obviously, you will need some front-end stuff. Obviously HTML, perhaps some JavaScript, CSS, and all of that good stuff. But the stuff that can actually gear and work in the back end can be PHP. And in my opinion, PHP has a very low barrier of entry to actually start getting involved with creating websites. Take, for example, WordPress, a very easy way of creating, in fact, content management systems, or just simple systems, some of which have payment systems already attached to them. You can create a blog in a matter of minutes using WordPress. You don't necessarily need to be a true coder in the true sense to start creating a WordPress blog. There are these crazy one-click installs out there that can do that for you. That can be a way in to programming in PHP. PHP on the other scale, though, on the other side of the scale, can do some fantastically complicated stuff in terms of frameworks, in terms of APIs, in terms of interacting with other systems. So I've built several PHP APIs which interact with very complicated systems that handle all sorts of things in terms of crazy calculations, some of which are being used in other programming languages. So other programming languages give back perhaps a response, and PHP can pick that up. Or PHP can send a message onto a queue, and another programming language would pick that up as well. So PHP is extremely versatile like that. However, there are a number of things you simply can't do with PHP. PHP, after all, is a back-end programming language, which means that you can't do anything in terms of like JavaScript. You can't do any kind of animations with PHP on the front end. Therefore, you can't build mobile applications using PHP because PHP always runs on the server, which means that you cannot use PHP unless you are connected to the internet, unless you are connected to a server somewhere, unless, of course, you take the server with you. And there are a number of languages out there that do mobile applications and tablet apps far better than PHP. I would certainly not recommend you even consider using PHP as a mobile application development tool, nor would I recommend using PHP to create computer games, nor would I recommend using PHP to create operating systems either. It simply isn't what PHP is all about. However, saying that, PHP is extremely good at image manipulation. It has all sorts of awesome libraries such as ImageMagick or GD, to name a few, and these can change and alter and manipulate and crop and just transform images as they're being uploaded to the server. This can be done in either real time as it's being uploaded, or it can be done in a sort of a batch process in the background, which is usually what happens. Normally what happens on some of the websites, at least that I've been working on, you upload the highest resolution you possibly can, that is defined by the requirements of the application, and then PHP in the back end, in the background, does some clever cropping, some clever transformation stuff. It might even overlay the image with a watermark, perhaps, and then changes that image, crops it down into several smaller little images for things like thumbnails, for things like medium resolution images, and then, of course, you have your original image. So PHP is very good at image manipulation. PHP is also extremely clever and extremely good at command line interface tools. And I know that there's other programming languages out there that have a similar thing, but most frameworks in PHP come with a command line interface. Take, for example, Symfony or Drupal or Laravel or any other major framework. They all have their command line interfaces. Symfony, for example, has its own console, so does Drupal, for instance, where you can actually drill down into the framework using the command line to do some clever things in terms of maybe communicating to a database or just debugging your code or just having a look at things like services and all of that other good stuff. PHP is also extremely fast, and this has come off of the back of the latest PHP 7 version. That is an extremely great speed bump. People have actually been saying that it's at least 2 times higher the speed of what they currently had before, depending on obviously the application and what that application was doing. I have seen huge increases, far more than 2 times in some of my legacy applications. PHP is extremely fast, and therefore you can now do some really clever things in terms of searching, where you are actually traversing a huge data set of information, and you can actually drill down into that far easier, far quicker, far more efficient than perhaps you could have done in the previous PHP 5.x days. PHP is also object-orientated. Now, lots of people say PHP isn't object-orientated. It's not a true object-orientated language, but let's be fair here. PHP does have object-orientated principles. You can create objects and classes, interfaces, all of that good stuff in PHP. And in fact, many of the frameworks are object-orientated. It does make coding that much easier in some regard. You obviously need to still keep with the good practices and the good principles and the solid coding standards when you're writing PHP code. But because it's object-orientated, it means that it can be extended in a plugin kind of way far more easier than perhaps normal procedural functional coding. And because of the OO-ness, the object-orientatedness of PHP, we also have a way of creating very easy to use libraries that can snap in and snap out of our frameworks extremely easily. This is all done in part by Composer and Packagist. Fantastic little tool that you can use to manage and monitor your dependencies in your application. And also there is the PSR, which is the PHP standard recommendations. So when you go ahead and create your third-party library, you can actually see if there's any standards out there that you should be adopting and adhering to. So it's a fantastic way of creating an application where you don't have to rely just on yourself to write the code. You can also use lots of components out there. And in fact, a lot of frameworks these days are built on top of several components. In fact, if you look at Laravel and if you look at Symfony, for example, even Drupal, then you can see that there are very similar, if not the same, components underneath the hood for various things. They might have some wrapper logic on the top, but at the bottom, you've got a lot of the stuff, the Symfony components, they're used quite frequently in different projects. And also you have micro frameworks as well in PHP. One that springs to mind is Slim PHP, a fantastic little framework that you can use. If you just want to create something extremely lightweight, then use Slim PHP. That is extremely useful for things like APIs. Now, with an API, you completely open up the doors to what you can do with PHP, because now you can interact and interface with other applications. Maybe you are accessing another application's API, or maybe you are writing an API for other applications to access your data, which means that you can actually use PHP for things like government data sets. It's fantastic because perhaps those data sets are coming and being produced and built by other programming languages. For example, it could be Python or C or whatever, and they will create those data sets, but those data sets can be grabbed using something called Guzzle, which is a fantastic way of accessing different endpoints, HTTP endpoints, be it a API endpoint, for example, that you can use, and you can do that in PHP, and I've done that a lot of times and it's worked out extremely well. I'll be interested to hear what you guys use PHP for. If there's anything that I haven't mentioned, if there's something that you suggest using PHP for, then let me know. Put your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you haven't done so, please do subscribe. I also do tutorials as well every Tuesday, so do subscribe to check that out. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again in the next one. Cheers. Bye.